The next presentation has to do with our branch library study. This too was requested by the council a while back, and you're going to receive a summary of the work that was done by WSU. I think this is an exceptional report, significant amount of data that is backing the recommendations for each of the branches, as well as some recommendations that go across the entire branch system. I apologize in advance in that there is a lot of information in this presentation, but I wanted you to have the benefit of the data so you could understand the recommendations, and then if you have the questions, you'll have all of the information in front of you. So with that, Misty, you're back on.
I thought he was going to apologize in advance for having a lot of Misty in one day, so I was ready for it, Bob. All right. So this project has been going on for a while, and without a doubt, our most data-driven project that I think we have ever done. So here are some of the research questions that many of you posed back to us when we did interviews with you long ago to kick off this project. But looking at what are the purposes of the branch libraries, with the advanced learning library coming on board, how does that look? What are branch models that are out there? How do we think about distribution of resources? What are the perception of users, non-users? What are other communities doing? And what are recommendations to increase market and services at our branches? So that was how we framed this work that we were doing. There are layers and layers of data that we have collected on this, and anybody who wants to get in the weeds will be glad to share that. But we did 460 in-person interviews from folks at the branches. We did 250 observations where we actually just watch people and figure out how they are using the libraries and the branches, what they do there. We did focus groups. We did an online survey that had an incredible response of almost 2,000. This was a way for us to connect into the non-users especially. We took user data. We worked with a firm called Civic Technologies who took checkout data and computer data and Wi-Fi data of users and looked about where they are from and how often they are using it, how often they're checking out books, where they are going to check out the books. We took that information and geocoded it using census data to look at checkout density. Where are the high frequency users? Where are the high frequency technology users? And then the last thing we did was they put together market segmentations. So actually to understand who are we reaching and who are we not reaching. So a little different approach on this effort with the libraries. So just to provide a framework as we move into the recommendations and all the details in the branches, here's what we know. There's a high satisfaction of library users. And I want to thank Christy and Cindy from the library who overwhelmingly, more than 80% of folks we surveyed, and you can look in the details, just very satisfied with the services that they get for all of this. There's a high appreciation for library services. 97% from online survey reported appreciation for that, and even in the non-users, 71% thought that library services was an important thing for our community to be doing. And this matches up with national data out there also, but within our community, there's a high community support. Branch service, unique markets. So Civic Technologies has worked across the country on doing this type of work. Wichita has more markets than any other community they work with, and Councilmember Fry seems to be nodding because he knows this world better than we do, but they were shocked at the number of segments that we have. And while there's some similarities, there's some very unique qualities, and when we start talking about branches, that's going to pop out at you for that. They have really fun names that they use for how they categorize these markets. So of your 47 markets, 25% can be categorized into two areas. One is the urban moms and dads, and so these are folks with young families that are using your library services, often a more low income, and are connecting in this in for a family service. Sitting Pretty is the next segment, and I think it's very significantly smaller, 7 or 8% compared to Urban Moms and Dads, which is 17%. And those are folks are more on the suburban area of your community that are using the library services for that. And each branch has a unique market, and we'll talk more on that. The other thing that we learned, not just in the research, but in talking with folks and in the surveys, it's providing that equitable access. It's thinking about things about literacy rates, unemployment services, job services, workforce services came back as a critical component that they are wanting to see at the branches. And you have history from library already who are working with Workforce Alliance and bringing some programming there. Transportation, one of the things we'd encourage you to look at is people who uses the branches, how frequently they use the central library. It is not as frequent as you would think, and some not at all. And so that proximity is a concern. And then also is that connectivity to the internet. And when you look at Wi-Fi users and computer users, for some folks, this is their only opportunity to have that connection. Quality of life, not just in general access to information and access to books and resources, but also the entertainment value your libraries provide, especially to families and especially to families that are low income. From everything from DVD checkouts to programming that's going on, it impacts the quality of life for your community. And then the last thing is trying to think about, there are always limited resources. These are issues you face every day, so how do we create a strategic focus? Nationally, there's a decline in library use. You've seen a decline in gate counts at your branches over the last 3 years. What we know from Civic Technologies is that your library is only reaching 30% of the market. And there's national statistics, but in comparing what Civic Technologies did with 2 other communities, in Denver, their library system's reaching about 47%, and in Las Vegas, they're reaching about 39%. And so that's apple-to-apple comparison on how they put that information together. Okay. I'm going to turn it over now to Lisa Dodson. Lisa is a senior project manager at the school, and she did the work on the research for this with other communities.
Make sure I can advance this. One of the things that we did was go out and look at the National Library Data Service to see how we compare with peers. And in order to make the data comparable, we looked at it on a per capita basis. So how much income are the libraries getting per capita? We found that the Wichita Public Library gets $22.38. That's considerably lower than the national average, which is $36. Johnson County, $56, Kansas City, Kansas, $54, Omaha, $27, and Oklahoma City metro area, $44. So in comparison to the peers that we looked at in the national average, we're below average. We heard a lot in our conversations, I can get everything from my smartphone, so why would I go to the library? And this is an issue that libraries are dealing with nationally. So we began to dig deeper and find out what other things do libraries do for the community besides warehouse books. And they do many, many things. They're very important for community development. They provide education. They help promote democratic values. Literacy is critical. And when we say literacy, we mean not only traditional literacy models, but also digital literacy. Libraries are becoming a very important resource for teaching people how to use digital resources. And they also are faced with social problems, such as homelessness. And many libraries are engaging in addressing those problems actively through partnerships and providing services for the homeless. Libraries are important for economic development. They serve as a neighborhood anchor. They can help assist with employment services, small business services, whether that's they need a fax machine or they need to look up a piece of information and they need help searching in a database. They help with entrepreneurship. That might be helping them get a patent. So libraries do play a role in economic development. one of the things that really jumped out at me in this research project was the importance of taking the library services out to the people. And this is being done in a variety of ways. Pop-up libraries are where libraries go to community events. They might have a tent. People can get library cards. They can check out books or materials. There's a hot spot there they can use. And the libraries actually sometimes deliver children's programming and other kinds of programming at these pop-up sites. Bookmobiles are making a new appearance. They started 100 years ago in Omaha, and many libraries are using bookmobiles. Topeka and Kansas City and Oklahoma City use bookmobiles. The advantage of that is you can move the library around the community, you can reach new audiences, you can serve schools. So bookmobiles are reoccurring. Libraries also play a role in civic discourse. They bring together small communities of difference for dialogue. I don't know if you're aware of the programming that the library is currently doing, but that's an example of community engagement and civil discourse. Book clubs, other kinds of opportunities for dialogue happen at libraries. Libraries are becoming what they call the third place. If home is the first place and your job is the second place, libraries can be that gathering place, that neutral third place. Libraries also address the society resource divide. Not everyone has a smartphone or a tablet. Libraries can fill that need. They can provide access to information that's critical. And in today's world, if you don't have access to information, you're really left out of the economic pie. So we came up with a group of recommendations that apply for all of the branches and then some that apply for specific branches. And I'm going to go through those that apply for all of the branches, and Misty will then talk to you about specific branch recommendations. We heard over and over again that they would like the libraries to be more like bookstores. They would like to have colorful decor, displays of books related to things like teen fiction grouped together. They would like different kinds of seating where families can sit together. They would like the library to offer spaces that are for dialogue and conversation, but also quiet spaces that are for reflection and study. So noise levels were mentioned. We found that each branch has its own unique personality or service or audience. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter model for branches. The branches need to look at these market segments that they serve and customize their services to meet those needs. We heard a lot that they would like more community services and programs, whether that has to do with workforce, it might have to do, Evergreen was interested in programs that related to becoming a citizen and U.S. history. So depending on the branch, they wanted different types of services and programs. We found that there's a need to increase the partnerships, particularly with the school district and organizations like the Boys and Girls Club. So empowering the branches to reach out to their neighborhood and to collaborate with the neighborhood leaders to develop partnerships will be important. Explore marketing strategies for those new audiences using the segmentation analysis. And we'll show you some maps in a minute about that, but this was what Civic Technologies did. When we mentioned the urban moms and dads and the Sitting Pretty groups, we know what those are for each branch, and we have a comprehensive book that they provided that has a great deal of data that needs to be mined, and I believe the staff has already started doing that to determine how to market to these new audiences. We're seeing a trend nationally for more regionalism. So while our library does do some collaboration with our neighbor libraries, we would encourage them to continue to do that and look for ways that collaboration can happen. Expand public engagement at the branches, and this should be done through a variety of ways, the mobile libraries, the pop-ups, but we also heard a lot of people that said we'd really like to have an app from the library that says, oh, we see you like to read John Grisham. Maybe you would like this new John Grisham book that's coming out. So they want to be able to get connected to the library through their tablets and smart devices. Develop a strategic plan to achieve those branch goals. Each branch is so unique and has such unique audiences that they need to determine what their specific branch goals should be and allocate resources to move forward in that. We want to align the advanced learning library services with the branches. There's an opportunity to do some early programming out in the branches. We did hear a little bit of resentment about the investment that's going into the downtown library versus into the branches. They are interested in how is that advanced library going to help what I get at my branch. As Misty had mentioned earlier, there is a lot of loyalty to branches, and they see that as their library. Reduce the barriers to service. I mentioned the app, looking at hours of operation, those sorts of things. Providing more e-materials, e-books, and e-databases that can be accessed through devices from home. Reevaluate the fee policies. We frequently heard in the focus groups that they would like to have the library provide free meeting space for community activities. For example, at Evergreen, there's a lady who teaches ESL classes as a volunteer. She has a group of students that come, and she pays the room rental every week for that space to provide ESL to the neighborhood community. We would encourage the library to look at those fee policies. There are some good reasons for those policies, but reevaluate them and see if there is a way to make the library that third space for the neighborhood where people can gather and have that opportunity. Leverage your customer loyalty. As we've mentioned over and over, they are really committed to their branch, and they are some of your best marketing tools. So if we want to reach out to that additional 70% in the community, we want to use those people. Testimonies. Identify and measure strategic impacts. One of the things we found is that the kind of data that we're looking at, such as gate counts and checkout numbers, is one good measure, but there should be other measures. We should set priorities for branches, and if, say, for example, Alfred's priority is workforce development, then we need some measures that talk about our impact on workforce development in that area and in that neighborhood. So we want to look at some different measures besides just count measures. And finally, you can't do these things without resources. So we need to do some work on aligning our priorities with resources. If we determine that resources are fixed, then we have to say what is realistic for us to accomplish with those resources. If we want to reach out and do more engagement, then we might have to look for other resources. Here's an example of the maps that Civic Technologies produced for us. This is the map of the service areas for each branch, and they're each different colors. So, for example, the pale green up here is Comatera. Comatera serves a much different audience. They are a group of folks that want to order their book online and drop in the grocery store and pick it up. That's what they want. Other neighborhood libraries, for example, Angelo, they're interested in workforce development. They're interested in having more resources for African American and African cultural experiences. So this is what was determined as the reach for each branch. The libraries branches fairly well cover the city. However, the area in the southeast corner and west, as we have additional development, we'll need to consider how to serve those. We asked one of the questions in the surveys that we did, how far are you willing to drive to the library? And the majority said we're willing to drive 10 minutes to the library from their home. So if we look at what is a 10-minute commute for our service area, you can see the different colors. And then the growth for the 2035 population area is the pale blue line. So you can see that we are looking at growth west and then the southeast that need additional library services based on this 10-minute drive time. We also had maps for the different market segments. So this is an example of the maps for urban moms and dads and their market potential. So when we look at where are urban moms and dads in the city and where would we focus them, we can see that the dark blue is the more intense areas. So there's an area down here in the southeast part of town that we could look at serving. There's some north up towards Evergreen and Angelo. There's a little bit down towards Alford. So these are the areas. We can delve down into the data, look at each market segment, and see where these folks are located and how we might approach them. I'm now going to turn it over to Misty, who will talk to you about the branches.
Thank you, Lisa. So I'm going to go through and talk a little bit about what the market said, but also what the people from each of these branches said in the surveys and what we found in the data. So the Alfred, you're looking at a population with age around 20 to 30. Most have a high school education level, median income typically in the 30,000 or less category. But you also have a segment of block groups that's a little bit, has a higher income level, a little bit older population. Most are blue-collar professions. One of the things that we found at Alford that was a bit of a surprise was, with the exception of Evergreen, they saw a need for bilingual services. And so that almost 50% indicated that was a need. Next to Central and Westlake, Alford also has the highest number of computer and Wi-Fi usage. So just looking at that data when you're thinking about how do we make this experience at Alford different, what are those customers saying there, those are some of the attributes that we saw from Alford. Another thing that we'd point out is this is the user density. This is the checkout map. So where are people that are checking out books at Alford, where are they coming from? And so you can see, as you would expect, that most of the darker colors is the higher density. A lot of that is coming right around Alford. You've got a group up by the 21st Rock Web area that is coming and using services at Alford too. Don't sure what that is. Where speculation, it could be on their way to South Y, it could be on their way to a job, it could be something else. But this map shows you that even though they said it's a 10-minute drive time, they might be checking out books differently than they said that they are going to. So our only point of showing this is there's so much information here that you can use to tailor that branch experience. We also
Misty, that big brown blob in the left-hand corner down there, is that saying that's heavy users of Alford?
Mm-hmm. And the different for the density that is there. So not a lot of people, but they would have a high checkout rate density. Wow. Yeah. Okay, and then this is when we talk about all those 40-plus segmentations. These are how they broke down the highest segment from each census block group.
Can I ask you real quick on that last slide? Is that the number of people per month? Or what's the number there?
I believe it was for the year. Was that Cindy?
It says the workers that live up there, they're using it.
Cynthia Berner, Director of Libraries. For all of the maps that look like this, we extracted about 6 months of circulation data from our system, and then they geocoded, mapped that, divided that out. So in each of these maps, the darker the brown color, the more items. Those are physical items. Those aren't the number of people that we're reaching, but that's just showing where the material is going from the branch.
But the time period, like where it says, what is this? I can't remember. It's 17. Like the bottom, is that over a 6-month period then? That's how many items were checked out on average?
What they did is then they extracted that back out for an average month to show us for an average.
So that's supposed to be a reflection of a month?
Right.
Okay.
So it says 1,700 to 28 or 26 or something like that items per month?
It was not a snapshot just for a month. They took a period of time, then they averaged it out over the time. Okay. So that's the number of items that are going into that census tract to go through. So, and in this case, you can see a lot of them had fewer than 178. The darkest range was from 1722 to 2815 on this map. So in the large census tract that goes down off of K42, we had somewhere between 1,700 and 2,800 items that went to that area.
Are there mobile, are we taking any mobile units down there from Alfred that they're getting
No.
materials from?
No.
The Y doesn't have a library.
So we did that. What Civic Technologies did for us is we took the address that the customer provided to us. Generally, that's a residence. In some cases, it may be a business address. And then that's what they geocoded and overlaid onto the census tracts.
Interesting.
Cindy, were you also able to segment those items further to find out what they were checking out?
We have some data when then we can do books or media, right, or things as well.
I do remember when I worked at Cessna, a lot of people would run over there at lunch hour, get books, movies, whatever kind of
Right.
different media.
That's kind of where I was going with that too, was wondering if it's more technical in nature or checkout type of that type of thing.
And it does drill down to types of fiction, nonfiction, juvenile, yeah, so there's tons of information here. So at the end of this effort with all the data collections, we worked with staff to talk about, well, what does this mean? What are the implications for this data? So they came up with looking at these market segmentations and kind of what they saw as some of the top focus, and they also came up with a tagline to start thinking about these branches differently. So Alfred was tools to power your day, increased bilingual services, because of the mobility of the folks that are coming into Alfred, making sure they have self-checkout stations, improved seating so that it's that ease of convenience if they are driving in from other areas. Wi-Fi access critical, targeting families with young children and modest financial means, going back to who's using these services right now. And then providing time-saving resources to help with education, job searches, technical information, entertainment. Again, it reflects on what the market is telling us, but also about what the users were telling us when they did those surveys.
Can you back up? I think you missed slide 15.
This is the market segmentation for all of those. So for each census group, they labeled what was the highest representation market segmentation for that group. So you can see for each of them, they look differently. And you can delve down into this. But our point that we want to make is understanding that each of these branches looks different.
Right. Do we have this PowerPoint sent to us yet so we can
Get into
magnify
it.
this?
Yeah, it's hard to read, we know. And then also in the full report, it gives that information to you too.
Thank you.
You bet. Maya Angelou, again, predominantly 20s to 30s that are in the block groups that are using these services, predominantly African American. High school education is the most common achievement level. However, there's a higher percentage of the population without high school degrees compared to the general public. More single-person families in this area than others. Again, you can see the density, what that looks like. Again, pretty concentrated around that facility, but they are reaching out and having contact with other parts of our community. When you look at their target audience, the city core and Metro Strivers are some of the segments that they divided this into as far as the outreach that you should have and what that market looks like differently. Things that we know from this then are retooling workforce for workforce development. That was a huge part of that conversation, not only in the surveys but also in the focus groups. Literacy needs for this community, an emphasis on children, Boys and Girls Club right by their schools, right there. How do we connect with those? Something that we heard in the focus group was the need for homework resources. A lot of these kids don't have scanners, they don't have printers. That need is significant for this site to have some of those resources. Meeting space and hours of operation, it's always a difficult issue with the hours of operation, and you're still hearing those concerns. Not an answer for you, just another question. I think you have to keep experimenting with that and talking to the folks there. And there was Step Up with Angela was their tagline that they came up with. Komatara looks different. Median age group is a little bit older, in the 30s to 40s, college educated. Typical income is somewhere in the 70 to 90s. You have some single household incomes, probably in the income levels in the 50s. You have a high portion of retirees with higher incomes. Most are coming from white-collar occupations. You can see that they have a great penetration into that northeast and east area that folks are using this. And you can see what their service area is and look at those segments are different. Their tagline is that we are the gold standard of service on your terms, is what the staff came up with. Very much the bookstore environment, focusing your materials on the popular new releases that are coming through there, convenience and direct outreach to those nearby neighborhoods. And you will find that Komatara, I think, was the second highest user of the central library services. So again, that drive time may not always play out, but they are users of your central services, and I think will be great proponents of the advanced learning library. Evergreen, and things that you know, significant Hispanic population. But you also have a high number of retirees that is a part of the Evergreen service area. Many family staff is typically married. Income level is varied, so it's hard to get an idea on that. High school education and blue collar are the most common block groups, with the retirees just looking different from the others. Again, Evergreen has a good penetration into the north area. And if you look at their market segmentations, you're going to have a bunch of different markets that are unique to Evergreen as compared to the other parts of the community. Focuses on literacy, provide more materials in Spanish, but also we've talked to things about American culture, becoming citizens, immigration information, high need in that area. Technology access, and then trying to maybe capitalize on that, the retirees that you have there. What are some different services that can be looked at for them? Linwood, 20s to 30s, medium income, 30,000 or less. Highest central library visitors of any branch. So the folks that are using Linwood are also more likely to use the central library. Basic technology needs is what we heard when we did those interviews, and that this is often the source for their technology and connections. A lot of urban mom and dads, blue-collar workers is what this segmentation shows. And then, again, their density level is focused primarily around Linwood. They use theirs as the connection to the rec center and being located in a beautiful park environment. How can they capitalize on that for them? So looking at partners with the rec center, looking at leveraging that park environment. Hours of operation was a concern at Linwood, so maybe, again, experimenting with that. Linwood, if you're have not been there, is a little hard to find, so maybe some signage issues to direct folks there. And more than any others, I think there was a focus on entertainment enrichment opportunities that we heard from the users of the library services. So how can you, again, connect with that? Okay, Rockwell is your microcosm of the community. There are 24 different market segments represented in Rockwell. It is a great pilot place to test out things that might be going on at the Advanced Learning Library to see what folks are interested in, because it is just a small representation of our community. It has a huge geographic outreach that it is responsible for. And so finding different ways to move services out of that branches and connecting to other parts of the community is going to be really important for you. And another thing that we found out in the survey is there's a significant portion of the customers do not have any alternative technology choices. And so Rockwell is by far their primary source for that technology. So again, when you look at their market segmentation map compared to others, just by colors alone, you can tell that there's a lot more variety there. They do have a pretty good connection into the north, but when you look down at the southeast, you can see that the checkout rate declines, and that proximity is probably a concern there. Rockwell, all your taste in one place. That bookstore environment, outreach is important. It's a chance for you to pilot test some of the prototypes that you're wanting to do at the Advanced Learning Library, and growing the digital literacy for that. Okay, last one. Westlink, again, a different population, more the middle-income families, urban or suburban environment. They have the second to Kamatara in higher education attainment, higher income levels, and more advances in technology. So it looks different. You know this, but space, parking, and location are just a huge concern at the Westlink Library. Again, they own the west side as far as checkout data and penetration into that market. Westlink is your link. Addressing the plans for space at this facility is going to be something to be discussed, whether that's a new location, a shared space, mobile or pop-up libraries. Providing a physical makeover at this spot will be important. And you need to accommodate those working families, including maybe some that have a little more leisure time that you can connect in. Okay, a lot of information. Last slide. So next steps, you have a lot of conversations ahead of you on the policy questions, how to think about community coverage, delving into this plethora of data that we have provided, and then how do you connect to the Advanced Learning Library. I think it's important that the branches see that as a critical part and accessible for them. Thinking about community impact, and then aligning those resources with you. So, the end. A lot of information for you.
Questions? So I want to go back for a second to slide 6. So it's nice to show comparisons, but more importantly, I would love to see us drill down and find out what we're missing.
Okay.
And secondly, where some of these people are placing their dollars, because it kind of tells you what's most important.
We do a study that's published every year that Cindy has a subscription service to that talks about national trends. For example, ebooks are growing and print books are not, those kinds of things. So it is possible to do that by peers.
That'd be great. Other questions?
Since we're talking about that slide, is that like the overall budget, or does that include like the new library we're building, or what's composed of the numbers there, the income per capita?
This wouldn't include the new library because this is historical data. The 2016 report reports 2015 data. So this is from a report of libraries across the nation that consistently report their data. So our library sends in the data, and we use that for the comparison.
So it's our total spend?
Right. It includes local funding plus any funding that's raised from the private sector.
Okay.
In your report on page 18, there's a bigger chart
Yes.
that gives a little bit more information about ebooks, print materials, DVDs, all of that. So.
Right. You can see how they're dividing up their expenditures there.
All right. Yes, Vice Mayor.
Cindy, this is really a comment for you, I think. Up at Evergreen Rec Center, Neighborhood Resource Center, we are undertaking a planning and visioning initiative where we're really thinking about how to transform the whole Evergreen complex into a hub of community life. And when we talk about the complex, we're talking about the rec center, the neighborhood resource center, the library, Tops Preschool, Cloud Elementary, and Grace Med. And thinking about what are the needs in the community, what partnerships can we build to meet those needs. And so we would love to engage with the library to have a bigger conversation about that. Anne has joined us for a couple of those and has, that's been a good start of a partnership, but I hadn't really thought about it in terms of this branch study and what you might be learning. And so I think we'd like to get with you and really delve down into that Evergreen piece some more and then think about how, what could be done at the library and what could be done in other parts of the complex so that we're not duplicating and that we're providing as much as we can.
We'll be happy to do that. And I think one of the great benefits from this study, besides the work for the library, is the power of the civic civic technologies market segment information and how it can help all of our other city departments as well. So
Yeah,
we look forward
I'm
to the
really
opportunity
interested
to
in
share
getting
that.
the demographic data and that, what did you call it? Civic technologies data.
Technologies is the firm.
Because I'm sure whatever data was gathered for the library is the same for that whole complex up there. So I can't wait to get our hands on that. So thank you.
Bob, I know that we've talked a little bit about Southeast Wichita. I think the data showed that Southeast Wichita has some need. Probably there's some untapped potential there as far as getting books, electronic services, and that sort of thing in the hands of people that don't have them. How can these pop-up libraries help to fill some of that gap for right now? Because I know that we're not going to build a branch library down there right now. So
I think it's just that whole effort of engaging and figuring out where those population centers are, and whether that's with pop-up at events or schools or businesses. I mean, they can be rolled out in lots of different ways, or if it's a mobile connection that's making its way through. But that's what we're seeing in other communities, because the bricks and mortar cost of doing things like that, there's another way to service folks. And so it's only limited by your imagination on finding those population centers, and it could be neighborhood associations. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways to think about that.
well, yeah, we talked about transportation and youth employment services. Well, transportation is huge also in this arena. So even taking those pop-up libraries, the technology, mobile technology vehicle, or whatever you want to call it, to these areas of the city would be great for us to explore. So.
Looks like that wraps it up.
Great. I just want to thank Cindy and Christy. That's nothing like having folks come in and delve into all of your efforts, and they have been wonderful to work with. So thank you, Mayor, City Council, and thank you, City Manager.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert, anything else?
That's it, Mayor.
All right, so we're done for the day. Thank you.